Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this discussion this afternoon. And I would like to thank Delphi Economic Forum for bringing us together, even virtually, for this very important and I think very timely discussion. As the economy seeks to restart here in Greece and basically adjust to the new reality, but at the same time press ahead with strategic investments and also equip for green development and technological challenges. I have today here with me a very interesting panel. I would like to start first of all with Andrew McDowell, the Vice President of the European Investment Bank, who is going to explain to us how EIB aims to help Greece address investment and financing needs going forward. Mr. McDowell. I think we have a technical issue. I will go ahead with Minister Christos Staikouras. Mr. Staikoura, Greece has dealt with the public health challenge from the coronavirus very well, but on the economy front, the pandemic will lead to a recession of at least 8% this year. So I would like to ask you, what will Greece's investment and financing needs be as it tries to emerge from this crisis?
First of all, I would like also to thank the Delphi Economic Forum for inviting me. As we all know, the Greek economy entered 2020 on a sound footing with promising perspectives. Unfortunately, this course came to a halt due to the coronavirus crisis, a symmetric shock globally. Since its beginning, the Greek government has adopted a comprehensive, dynamic and realistic package of measures in order to support policy health, employment, business liquidity, and social cohesion by spreading a wide safety net above households and enterprises. Indeed, this was confirmed yesterday by the Eurogroup, which mentioned, on quotes, they commended the Greek authorities for the quick and decisive policy response in taking the necessary economic and fiscal support measures. This conclusion was underpinned by 5 events over the previous couple of weeks. First of all, the successful issuance of a 10-year GGB. This constitutes a vote of confidence from the markets. The second one is a significantly lower, compared with the European average, contraction of the Greek economy in the first quarter of 2020. The third one is a significantly lower than the euro area average decline in the economic sentiment indicator. The fourth is the completion of the process from one systematic bank, Eurobank, in order to implement the Hercules scheme, while deposits in the banking sector continue to increase. And the fifth one has to do with the successful completion of the 6th enhanced surveillance report, the third consecutive positive report in less than a year. All the above confirm that we are moving on the right direction. The total cost of the measures is estimated at 24 billion euros and may increase depending on the development of COVID-19, as well as on the available financial and fiscal space of the country. A crucial question that you said is how we will capture these financing needs. We have ensured fuels to implement this coherent policy. First of all, we manage domestic cash reserves of the general government and other entities with prudence. We successfully borrow from the markets either through GGBs or T-bills. We execute the budget in a satisfactory way. We are ready to use to the best of our ability. and at the right time the existing European financial instruments like the SURE program and the Pan-European EIB Guarantee Fund. And of course, we support the ambitious proposal coming up from the European Commission to create a new recovery instrument. Taking into account all these issues, according to the preliminary estimates of the Stability Program, indeed, the Greek economy is expected to shrink significantly, while the uncertainty globally continues to be high. However, equally important, or even more important, is the composition of growth. We need to enhance not only the quantity, but mainly the quality of the domestic product. Greece faced for many years a significant investment gap. We have to close it. In this direction, we set forward two interrelated objectives. The first is how we will close the negative output gap, safeguarding at the same time responsible public finances. And the second one is how we will improve the economy's supply side, in other words, the productive capacity, in order to achieve sustainable growth rates and a high level of social cohesion. To achieve these objectives, we have ambitious plans for the period ahead. Just to pick up some of them. First of all, the implementation of a prudent fiscal policy incorporating the gradual reduction of tax rates and mainly of social contributions. The second one is a new insolvency code with several safeguards to filter strategic defaulters in order to tackle the high private debt. The third priority is the implementation of the asset development plan. Despite adverse market conditions, we have provided significant progress in many entities like DEPA, port authorities, Alimos Marinas, and even Hellinikon project. The fourth one has to do with the ongoing digital transformation of the public sector, which, inter alia, will serve to further ease the administrative burden for households and enterprises. The fifth one is the continuous implementation of the government's reforms agenda, introducing 25 draft bills in the Parliament until the end of July, covering a wide range of policy actions from microfinance and corporate governance to electric mobility and endogenous sources of growth like education, research, and development. Sixth, the implementation of structural reforms, covering the regulatory framework for doing business, the justice system, arrears, the management of public investment, the rural policy. And fifth, investment in the green economy. We have set ambitious goals in our national energy and environment strategic plan, and we are ensuring fair financing from the just transition mechanism. Taking into account and advantage of all the above, completing and implementing the national growth strategy, we will have the opportunity not only to recover, but to enter a strong and sustainable upward trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stoikouras. Now moving to Professor Pissaridis. Mr. Pissaridis, I would like to ask you, what role can technologies play in creating jobs in Europe, and especially in southern European countries like Greece, where unemployment is high already, and strategic sectors such as tourism, that usually employ many people, are going through challenging times, to say the least, now?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you very much. Times are indeed challenging, especially for an economy like Greece that focuses on services and especially services. Technology, unfortunately, has been neglected in Greece to a large extent. Greece is not the only guilty part here. In fact, the whole Southern Europe has neglected it, even Italy, but more so the smaller countries. Whereas Northern European countries like where Germany being the leader there, but also the smaller countries around it, like Austria, Netherlands, and the Nordics in particular, have been doing a lot more research on the technologies, have been implementing a lot more research. Their manufacturing is more or less automated. and they're now moving on to artificial intelligence. And in many writings in the press and sort of talks that you hear on television and all that, people usually hear about robots and artificial intelligence, and they're saying, oh my God, our jobs have been taken away. In fact, it's the exact opposite. The countries that are more technologically advanced and they've adopted more of these automata do have higher employment rates. I mean, in Europe, the highest countries with automation are Germany, Denmark, Sweden. And they are also the countries with the highest employment levels. So when talking about new technology, you might say, well, you know, what can Greece do? There are such few manufacturing jobs. We have an economy which focused on things that are not being complemented by technology. How are we going to do it? In fact, there's no better way of saying how Greece can do it than by comparing it with other European countries of similar size. You know, if you don't want to compare it with Germany, fair enough, don't. We should be comparing Britain with Germany, and then this will not come out very well, as we know. Compare Greece with Netherlands, Denmark, the countries of the north, and they are creating jobs. Now, you might say, well, how do they do it? Well, it's fairly simple if you step outside of the box that says, so, you know, here is a robot that can put together some machinery manufacturing, therefore I don't need the worker. That's too narrow a way of looking at it. When we have new technologies, we don't just have the new machines, be it robotics or AI. What we have is a whole framework of innovation. It's the innovation potential for the country. It's the quality of its universities, of its research, the governance of its companies, its network system, its infrastructure for digital technologies. And I've been looking at three main indices of the innovation environment of a country in Europe and the United States, North America as a whole. One due to the World Economic Forum, one called the Global Innovation Index, and the other one is the Summary Index of the European Union. And I'm afraid in all the countries that have statistics there that you can use and compare, Greece is at the very bottom. It's below Spain and Italy, for example, and believe it or not, it's even below the Czech Republic, the only country that I could get consistent data from the formerly planned economies. Now, in parallel research related to this, I recently, about a year ago, took part in a Eurogroup meeting where they were discussing allocative efficiency in the Eurozone. Greece was way, way behind other countries in an efficient allocation of its resources, even below Cyprus. And I always think of Cyprus as being just behind Greece on everything, but on this one, we Cypriots were ahead. This has to change if employment is going to rise and jobs are going to be created in Greece, at least jobs that will keep young, educated Greeks in Greece. It's very easy to create jobs in domestic service and hotel service, and then you bring the tourists. I mean, the tourists will go to the Greek islands, whatever you do, even if you don't want them. They are very attractive, they have history, they have sunshine. Northern Europeans want those things in the summer. But that's not the point. You know, you can have people working there. But if you're going to keep the extremely good human capital that Greece has, and if you are going to improve productivity, you have to bring in new technology to help you in the allocation of resources, in making labor more productive, in robots and AI complementing people at work. And we are seeing how this is being done in other successful small countries. We don't even have to invent anything. We can just imitate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think our connection with Mr. McDougall has been restored now. Is that correct? Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Great,
can
great.
you hear me?
Yep. I would like to ask you now to explain to us how EIB plans to help Greece address its investment and financing needs going forward.
Well, good afternoon, Nectaria, Minister and colleagues, and apologies for my technical difficulties earlier. And thank you to all your colleagues in Athens for their work to reconnect me. Firstly, I mean, my congratulations to the Minister and his government for, I think, what is proving to be a kind of textbook case of how you manage a pandemic crisis. And I think Greece is obviously a source of great interest in terms of how effective the measures have been in terms of containment. And now, having said that, I'm sure the Minister is having sleepless nights about the price tag of that of the policies that have been needed in order to contain the pandemic. And he's obviously mentioned some figures in terms of the fiscal cost alone. Clearly, there's a large price tag for a country like Greece, which was already in a situation of high debt and question marks over fiscal sustainability, obviously in recent years that have only just been resolved in the last couple of years. So clearly, the EIB the Greece is a priority for institutions like the EIB in terms of providing affordable finance that will reinforce market perceptions about the sustainability of the policies that are being taken and the sustainability of the recovery. I mean, we see two areas, obviously, where we can be of assistance as the EU bank. I mean, the first is quite clearly to respond in the very near term with the huge increase in demand for working capital from corporates and particularly SMEs in order to survive the crisis, in order to survive, obviously, the lockdown, in order to survive, obviously, the very significant damage to the tourism industry and the tourism season in Greece, as well as other industries that have been impacted by the crisis, including shipping. So we're working, obviously, with the Greek government and with the Greek banking system to significantly increase the amount of funding that we provide for SMEs, in particular through the local banking system, at affordable rates. Not only are we providing funding and liquidity at very affordable rates, but we also intend to provide under this new European Guarantee Fund that has been set up by the European Union. We intend to provide very significant levels of guarantees to local financial intermediaries to share in the risk of rolling over their exposures to the corporate sector as the crisis continues. And we certainly see Greece as being a priority country in that regard, given the particular exposure Greece has to the industries that have been hardest hit by COVID-19, tourism, shipping, and so on. But clearly, as the crisis abates, and fingers crossed, the crisis will continue to abate, and we'll start to see some emergence from the lockdown continuing over the coming months. Well, we intend to be there also to provide longer-term finance, investment finance, both through equity and longer-term debt, particularly to support the type of green investments that Greece is planning, obviously, to support the recovery. Again, we intend to work, obviously, with the government really at two levels. First of all, in the creation of an equity infrastructure in Greece particularly for more innovative firms. One of the things that's I think been missing in the Greek ecosystem over the last decade has been a venture capital and private equity ecosystem that can support more innovative technology companies. And that's certainly something we intend to support the growth of. We've done one major transaction through the creation of a fund of funds called Equifund in the last number of years. And I think we can do a lot more in that particular area over the coming years. But secondly, there's also a need for longer-term debt finance in Greece. I mean, this is one of the issues Greek SMEs and corporates are going to face in trying to make investments as they emerge from the recovery, is the average maturities of loans from the Greek banking system tends to be much lower than in other European countries. So the maximum maturities that SMEs can secure without collateral. And again, I think through a combination of both funding instruments and also guarantees, we can work with the Greek banking system over time to start extending the tenors of their financing to the corporate sector in Greece, to give them a stronger financial base for financing investments as part of the recovery over the coming years. So, I mean, to summarize, notwithstanding the big decline, obviously, in the Greek economy, we intend to actually, if anything, expand our business plan and level of support for Greece. We signed up just over 2 billion in new commitments last year. I would expect that at the very least we'll do that again in Greece this year, and there's no reason why that should decline in any way over the coming years. Obviously, we're only one part of the picture, but we will work obviously very closely with other international financing institutions, particularly the EBRD and the local banking system, to try and make sure that at least the availability of finance is not an impediment to a strong recovery in Greece. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDowell. I would like to ask you on this. You mentioned SMEs, which are indeed the backbone of the Greek economy. So I was wondering if these funds that are allocated for Greece will make it to SMEs, which basically still have a hard time accessing lending from local banks.
Well, we're very clear, obviously, when we finance SMEs through local intermediaries, we're very clear in terms of the monitoring and reporting requirements of the financial intermediaries to show us firm by firm that our lending on attractive terms has been passed on to the SMEs, both in terms of the low interest rates that we charge, and we have a very clear conditionality in terms of the transfer of financial advantage from the financial intermediary onto the SMEs, and also in terms of, as I mentioned, in terms of tenor matching. So the longer we lend, the longer the tenors of our loans to the financial intermediaries, we expect those tenors on average to be matched by the loans that are financed by our instruments through the financial intermediaries. So that's a well-established business model. I have to say, actually, Greece is probably one of the most one of the countries where this product works the best. We have very quick allocation periods in Greece. So when we sign loans with Greek financial intermediaries, they are allocated to the eligible SMEs on average much more quickly than in most EU countries. And so I have no reason to believe this will not be the case in the future.
Thank you very much. Now moving to Professor Sachs. Mr. Sachs, the Greek Prime Minister has already said that he remains fully committed to the green agenda, and he has welcomed the European Green Deal. So I would like to ask you, how do you think Greece can manage the green transition best so it can show both environmental and economic gains, and at the same time benefit on a regional level, on a social level? For example, in northern Greece, where the lignite mining is being phased out, for instance. What do you think?
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me be part of this wonderful panel and discussion. First, let me congratulate and thank Greece for containing the epidemic, which is absolutely the highest priority for any government in any place in the world. There can be no economic recovery without stopping the pandemic. And Greece has done a very, very good job, one of the best in the world, and absolutely one of the best in Europe on this so far. Don't give up and relent, or don't let the virus sneak back into the country and drop the guard, because it spreads very, very rapidly when it spreads, and therefore it must be contained. I'm in a country where we have no political leadership at all, and where we have had 116,000 deaths so far in the United States. So I give special thanks to good leadership as being central. The next point I would like to stress is that Europe needs a better strategy for European-wide control of the epidemic, and I hope that the EIB plays a focal strategic role in that. Greece needs tourism, but the tourism has to be safe. So on the Greek side, I would just urge every single precaution possible, with monitoring on every island, with the quick response, with the watching what's happening everywhere where there are tourists, because Greece needs to maintain a safe environment for tourism, and it needs to maintain the reputation that this is one place where it is safe to go. And I think that this is crucial for Greece's economic recovery, but that means really positioning in the front line the public health monitoring and quick response and testing everywhere, and of course a sophisticated travel system so that people with the COVID-19 are not arriving in Greece. This needs a European strategy. Europe has done very badly in this epidemic, disastrous, starting France, Italy, Spain, with Belgium, even Germany, which is much praised, not so good from any international standard. And so really, there needs to be a much better European strategy. Of course, the UK has been absolutely miserable in this, like the US, which is what happens when you have populist governments that don't know how to lead, that don't know how to follow rules, that don't know how to take precautions. And so this is point number one. That requires plans. We don't have plans. This is not a market enterprise. This is a planning system to keep the virus suppressed. Second, green recovery. Clearly, the recovery is not going to happen on a spontaneous bounce back by itself. Even if tourism comes back to some extent, there's going to be high, persistent excess capacity throughout all of the economies of the world that will need investment-led growth. This is the idea of the European Green Deal. It's the idea of the Macron-Merkel proposal for 750 billion euros of financing at the EU level. Greece should play a very key role in this. It should be a recipient of a lot of these funds. Greece has tremendous renewable energy potential, of course, sunshine to begin with, as well as wind power. The lignite is the least of Greece's assets. What Greece has is sunshine, and it could be a major exporter of solar power and other sophisticated industries aligned with solar energy and with wind energy in the Mediterranean. This is where the jobs, the growth, the future, the electrons, the power generation of the future is going to come from. Again, Europe has not had a strategy that has been up to this task. It's left too much to the market. This really requires a European-wide strategy for making the transition to zero carbon. That, fortunately, is what the European Green Deal is. The third part of this pillar, I would say, in addition to controlling the epidemic systematically and investing in clean energy systematically, is investing more in the information technologies, which also Professor Pissarides mentioned. This is the way of the new economy. It's also the way to run an efficient society and an inclusive society. Greece has a lot of potential and a lot of leading IT specialists and a lot of ability to help lead in that sector, but that also should be strategic, and I was happy to hear the minister emphasize that. Will that create jobs or cost jobs to move more to the digital economy? I just want to add one more point to what Professor Pissarides said. You can have high employment, of course, in a technologically sophisticated economy, but you also tend to have better jobs and fewer work hours per year. So the way that the benefit shows up is more leisure time. And if you compare Greece and Denmark just now, Greece is working 2,000 hours a year. Denmark, 1,400 hours a year. That's 600 hours a year less. That's almost 15 weeks less of work. Greeks work very hard. This is the real truth, and there should be more leisure time based on higher technology standards. Final point, Greece is a partner with China in the Belt and Road Initiative. Bravo. Greece should help to connect Europe and the Belt and Road Initiative so that this is seen as part of Europe's recovery, not as something negative. The United States wants to make a Cold War with China. This is another Trump stupidity. Greece knows the truth. We need a good working relationship of Europe and China. Don't listen to the US Cold War rhetoric. This is a matter of cooperation in Eurasia, and Greece, as a major shipping country of the world, understands well that cooperation between Europe and Asia is key for prosperity and for well-being, and Greece can play a leading role in bringing a green belt and road and a European Green Deal together for a global recovery. So I see Greece playing a fantastic role because it's got terrific governance and the government's doing the right things, and it can help lead Europe now to sound solutions after a very unstable and poor performance during the first half of this year in much of Europe.
Thank you very much. Sounds very promising indeed. So I would like to go back to Minister Staikouras. Mr. Staikouras, we're talking about EU funds, and we all know that Greece doesn't have a very good history when it comes to absorbing and distributing EU funds. So I would like to ask you what if things will be different this time around, and also as regards funds, what do you expect? Do you expect that the recovery fund will be available even from this year?
First of all, I would like to thank all my colleagues for the kind words. However, as Mr. Sachs mentioned before, we have and we will continue to work hard. We're talking about funds, European funds. Let's hope, first of all, that the final decision regarding the recovery fund will be very close to what was proposed by the European Commission. An ambitious, rational, flexible proposal, which is mainly based on grants rather than loans, which gives every member state the opportunity to draw its priorities, which includes common borrowing, and at the same time, which emphasize on sectors that we mentioned before. So collectively, we have to do our best in order to put aside disputes, differences, to make funds available as soon as possible. We believe that these funds will be available in the first quarter of 2021, but decisions will take place in 2020, and to make the best use of them in order to become stronger as Europe, more productive and more competitive. Regarding Greece, it is true that Greece, the previous years, have been utilizing a lot of European resources, reflecting it in the domestic product. However, it is also true that over time, there have been delays and shortfalls, either due to immature projects or to selection processes with low growth multipliers or low added values. We believe, and we're working hard on that the government has proved it has planned, and at the same time it is acting on a timely base, on a methodical matter. We will take advantage of what Mr. Pisaridis mentioned before, the valuable human capital we have in Greece, in order to increase productivity, and I will repeat it, structural competitiveness.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pisaridis, I would like to ask you, as we all know, Greece has been through 3 bailouts and has implemented tons of austerity reforms, but still the underlying problems of the economy remain there. So I would like to ask you if you are optimistic that this time the financial model could change, could actually make a difference, this money and this new chance.
Well, let me say, in fact, it's good timing that you're asking me this question now, because it follows on from what Mr. Staikouras was saying. By the way, I didn't quite congratulate him as warmly as the other speakers, but I mean, the job that the government has done is quite remarkable in containing COVID. That's one thing we learned in Cyprus too. We've copied them, and we've done quite well too. I'm in London now, by the way, not in Cyprus. The reason, you see, that before funds were not being absorbed fast enough, and the reason that the memorandums did not leave any structural reform is that reform can never be successful if it's not owned by someone, usually government or public sector. If you reluctantly agree to some reform program because you are stuck in a corner and you need to take the money, it's not going to work. And that's, if you look at the rhetoric and the things that were said previously ever since the memorandums have started, you can see a half-hearted way of going in and trying to change words in the hope that something different will come along. There's never been a time when there was ownership of reform in Greece. As a result, reforms have never been implemented. They were just pasting over some cracks to persuade our lenders to give us more money. And in the end, the economy just recovered on its own, because every mature, decentralized economy will recover eventually. People want to spend. It's the first time that I hear ministers and the Prime Minister say things that make you believe that now there is ownership of the reforms, that the government is taking on the task of implementing reforms, not because they're imposed by someone from outside, but because they realize themselves that unless they do them, then Greece is going to fall further behind than what it was 2018, 2019, which is the latest year we have statistics. And that would be disastrous for the economy and for its population. And once you own the reforms, then it will be a lot easier to claim the money from EU funds. I mean, Greece needs that funding. It's got the lowest investment rates in Europe. It's only about 10% of its GDP is being invested. It's hardly enough to maintain the capital stock. So it's absurd to have all that money sitting there to enhance the capital stock and make it more productive and technologically more advanced, and not take it because there is some half-hearted way of saying, oh, well, why do we need these things? We were okay before, and all that. So, obviously the jury is still out because it's early days, but at least the first signs are there. And quite honestly, that's why I'm giving my time voluntarily myself, a committee that is tasked to provide some suggestions for some reform and growth plan.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Mr. Sachs, I would like to ask you, the pandemic lockdown in Greece has coincided and actually led the government to speed up the digital transformation here. And this move, of course, has been welcomed by the Greeks. But I would like to ask you, what do you think Greeks have to earn from investing in digital services? And how can we make sure that this digital transformation will not further widen social divisions, basically?
Well, the digital technologies have been the hero of epidemic control almost everywhere, because they've provided the information that's needed. They provided applications for public health. They have provided ways for government to provide services, even transfers to people around the world that have used them effectively. They've enabled work from home for many, many occupations and sectors of the economy. They've enabled e-education. They've enabled e-health. They've enabled e-commerce and e-delivery. They've enabled so many basic functionalities, telemedicine and so forth. So I think we've seen an incredible acceleration of use of information technology. And people that don't have access to broadband that is good and reliable are absolutely unable to manage right now in the economy. They can't have their children on school and distant learning. They can't get access to vital applications. They can't use e-commerce effectively. We have a huge digital divide in the United States. Of course, we have a divide on everything in the United States that is so wide that people are out massively in the streets protesting racial and wealth inequalities. Our societies become completely unstable because of these huge inequalities. What will digital do? In principle, it means more access. In practice, it can mean more concentration of wealth and jobs and can benefit only as part of the labor force. Who's the biggest winner, quote unquote, of the pandemic? It's Jeffrey Bezos of Amazon. His wealth is up $35 billion since the start of the pandemic because Amazon is soaring in its e-commerce. So we have to go into the digital technologies with eyes wide open, that it should be based on universal access to services, that there will be job losers who will need retraining, that so-called gig jobs or jobs in the IT-enabled economy have to have decent work conditions and decent training and protections. The economies that Professor Pissarides mentioned earlier in Northern Europe have a very digital-based economy, but they also have protection of quality of work for the whole labor force. So this is a big challenge. If you just have digital by itself, it will lead to widening inequalities. If you have digital plus attention to social fairness, it actually leads to more access, higher productivity, a stronger economy, and therefore you can share more among the entire workforce.
Thank you very much. We have 2-3 minutes left, so I would like to close with Mr. McDowell, and I would like to ask you, Mr. McDowell, what role can the EIB play in all these various processes that we examined in this panel, in the economy recovery, in the green transition, in the digital transformation, and the changing of the economic model generally?
Well, at the end of the day, the EIB is a source of finance for investments that supports EU and national policy goals, and therefore in all those areas that we've mentioned, digitalization, the energy transition, the recovery from COVID-19, these are quite clearly important national, Greek national and European goals, and we are there obviously to provide long-term financing on a favorable basis to support those. I just might pick up on one or two of the points that have been raised. I mean, I do agree with Professor Sachs. I think the first half of the year has not been Europe's finest hour in terms of either the response to the pandemic itself and the level of coordination, or indeed the planning for the economic recovery. But things are clearly moving in the right direction, I would suggest. And I think the minister has obviously been involved in the agreement on a very large package of measures that have already been signed off by EU finance ministers of 540 billion, really for liquidity support for crisis-hit economies. And now we're moving on, obviously, to the discussion of the recovery package and the debate around the proposals from the European Commission. I have to say, I think what has been proposed, and obviously the EIB, as the EU bank, doesn't have an official position because these are about to be subject to, fairly intense discussions and negotiations between the member states. But what has been proposed, I think, is quite clearly chimed with the political mood across most of Europe. I think there is now an enlightened self-interest that recognizes the need to demonstrate a much greater degree of solidarity than perhaps has been shown in the first half of the year. And it's enlightened self-interest because I think there's a recognition that without that solidarity, we really are putting at risk the great achievements of the European Union over the last 60 years. And in particular, the functioning of the single market. We've seen a situation where the crisis has led not to an asymmetric or symmetric shock, but an asymmetric shock, and is actually causing a greater degree of financial and economic fragmentation than was the case a year ago. So I think we're not there yet, but I certainly think the political mood is moving in the right direction, and certainly the IB will obviously take the lead from our political masters, but we'll play our part in obviously implementing what is going to be agreed at EU level on the recovery strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've run out of time. Thank you all very much. I think we've heard very promising, interesting, and quite optimistic ideas about the day after. Thank you all very much, and thank you all for watching us.